Welcome to Know Your Network, the bi-weekly series that explores thought-provoking topics that reveal the challenges carriers face managing today's fast-changing networks. Did you know that user experience accounts for almost half of the Net Promoter Score? Here are your hosts, Ken Gold and Scott Sumner.
So today's question is, why might cost be less important than user experience? Okay, that's another interesting question to kick things off, Scott. It's a good follow-on from our last discussion.
So you know that expression, you can only have two or three things: price, quality, right, and speed. So in a lot of this case, it's the same thing. You can reduce cost, and that's always going to be a goal for an operator, especially as the services increase. There's a ballooning number of devices on the network. 5G is coming. They got to keep costs under control. But if you lose the user experience, you actually end up losing the customer, right? So we'll take a look at that in a bit more detail. But also, customers are using the network quite a bit differently, and that means you got to measure and automate for that user experience differently as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good number is that 80% of the traffic in the network today is actually video traffic. It's not voice, and people are pretty tolerant of how their voice services are carried, but that they're not tolerant at all about how their video services are carrying. And things like YouTube, which come in as over the top, probably the most common video service today in the network, is so common that in fact people use it almost as a speed test to test the quality of a carrier and their ability to transport network. So being able to see these things, being able to manage them, this is a big deal. And and you think about it, you think about how if somebody does call on an issue, that's bad enough. That's bad enough that they did, but some of the statistics that we're seeing is that about 200,000 other people didn't call. So that's like about half a percent.
Right? It's amazing. Yeah. Very tolerant people or very passive people, but also a lot of people are experiencing degradations like we've seen before more than outages. Right. So they expect the problem that they're experiencing will probably go away by the time they call. And by the time they call, if they do, the people at the other end have no idea what they're experiencing. So they can't confirm. What you often hear in those situations is, just reboot your phone. Maybe your Wi-Fi is not working, but they're really not addressing the problem that the user has. And in the end, the service provider is still going to be blamed for that. Their name is on the phone.
Of course. And of course, what we're finding too is that that all contributes to the overall user experience. And user experience makes up about almost half of the Net Promoter Score. 49% of the Net Promoter Score typically is made up of user experience. So it's obviously a very big piece of Net Promoter Score.
It's actually the largest one.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to the question about so why is Net Promoter Score so important?
Yeah, I mean, Net Promoter Score, just how likely are you to refer your operator or your service provider to a friend or family? It's a really strong indicator that operators use to do an awful lot of different things. So it acts as a proxy in a way, right, to solve a number of different business problems and communicate. It turns out to be very powerful. Right? If you realize that Net Promoter Score is driven by the network performance itself to the majority, then you have to take that very seriously. But which ways, Ken, do you think is Net Promoter Score really getting used today by an operator?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it's in the telecom industry in general, it seems like it's not necessarily as well used as in some industries. I think it's maybe gaining some importance, but just this idea of being able to leverage Net Promoter Score for a number of ways. You could use it to find areas that are maybe in need of some capital investment. You have poor coverage, you have poor areas of performance within the network. That's obviously one thing. You can look at it from the perspective of the quality of service within the network. Have you set your policing systems up properly within traffic flows to make sure that you're not killing people's video services. These are some of the things that actually play well into the idea of impacting the customer experience. So there's a lot of I think within the operating company, I think Net Promoter Score really should touch on every aspect of.
That's kind of why it's a good thing to have for the operator as a common language, because you end up with the finance department looking at that. They know that churn is related to it. They know that, like you said, the CAPEX efficiency. Where are you going to spend to make the most impact? And we know that AT&T has this secret formula that basically is half driven by NPS in terms of where they're going to put their cell towers, where they're going to make their investments. Right. And how they model NPS is all their own magic. But the point of it is it's becoming critical to that. It's becoming critical to the call center, targeted marketing, in the end, it's going to show up in the SOC dashboards. I would assume that you're going to actually see that this impact, an event, a fault, an outage, how much NPS is it going to damage us depending on how long it lasts. I'm sure it's going to end up that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's some subtle aspects of NPS that maybe people don't, maybe they're not too aware of. Things like, it's not good enough to be good, right? If you think about NPS as a strong detractor, a detractor, neutral promoter, strong promoter, it's not good enough to have a good rating. A good rating doesn't do you any good because that person doesn't promote you in any way. The only people that promote you are the people who are strong promoters or promoters. And
especially with the network, right? It's very direct. You're sitting down at a bus stop with your friend, and you're both watching a YouTube video on different providers, and yours is working and his isn't. Good enough isn't good enough because you're going to be compared to the best, and it's very easy to do that comparison, and that's where these people build a sense of their brand loyalty. Exactly.
So this kind of leads us to the first statistic here, the next statistic, and that is that 70% of CSPs cite customer experience as the top goal for service automation or for assurance automation. And I think that's kind of an interesting, aspect. I think assurance in the past, especially in a physical network environment or even the hybrid, was viewed as a necessary evil, right? It's a cost it was a cost that was on a burden, but it was there because the service had an SLA tied to it, and we needed to understand what was happening. But now we're saying no. In fact, assurance ends up being fairly ubiquitously deployed within the virtual networks because that's the only way you can see.
The problems are hard to solve now. If you want to solve video problems, you can't there's no such thing as a simple video monitoring solution. You have to monitor the user plane, the control plane, what are people accessing at a given time. You have to look at it from a passive statistics to see where people are, what they're watching, but it doesn't tell you what they're experiencing because the traffic's encrypted. So then you need another method to do that. And that's one reason why automation is key, is to bring all those different systems together into a single point of view that gives them something simple to work from in operations.
Right. And that's a big part of it. And we're seeing that, of course, in a lot of the RFPs that we're seeing lately. Excuse me. But the question then becomes, so why is it really important to focus on, especially on customer experience? And we've got some results from surveys that were done. And if you look at a mobile operator, maybe about 7.5 to 10 million people, small to medium sized mobile operator, and you look at the costs that just come from their call center costs and from the amount of money that they have to give away in goodwill credits in order to either retain a customer or attract a customer. We're seeing that if you can improve your customer experience by about 50%, as measured by the complaints that come in, it's a significant amount of savings. We're seeing things like $25 million just in call center costs.
Yeah, these guys are spending a lot on the call center.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
And another $6 million just in goodwill credits that don't need to be paid out in order to retain customers that are unhappy. So this is obviously a big piece of the business. I mean, that's $31 million right there.
Yeah, that's where the biggest impact comes from, right? Is in the call center is one thing, but also the cost of acquisition to get new customers when somebody's churned is the single largest expense to the operator. So there's a lot to be said here about keeping people loyal and making sure they're happy. It's a massive cost that they burden year over year.
And by turning those neutral people or even detractors into promoters, obviously it helps on your ability to attract new customers because they're out there telling their friends and family that this is a good experience. I'm having a good time.
That's what reduces the cost of acquisition. It's just a virtuous circle, and once you get into that mode, you can see certain operators that have made the successful transition to a service-oriented operations center, and they're on a rise. Right, they'll get market share very quickly over a couple of years.
Right. And of course, we've seen that churn happens anyway, right? I mean, even in the best networks, you're going to have 10 or 11% churn anyway. But what we're seeing is that you get about 40% more churn from the detractors than you do from the promoters. So obviously by limiting the detractor side and boosting the promoter side, you have that much less churn to have to deal with. And the sort of the side note to that says that you get more profit. You get about 5% more profit from promoters over the sort of the view of
amazing, right?
If you look at a lifetime view of a contract as or maybe being two lengths of a contract, two terms of a contract with a customer, there's about 5% more profit involved in that, and that's a good number. You can't get around that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about people trying to save 3 to 5% in automation on OPEX, but if you can just get 5% more with existing customers, it's a fantastic place to start.
Yeah, that's it. So, okay, so when you come down to the question that we started off with, why might cost be less important than user experience? Well, that's it. I mean, it's the user experience that actually is going to drive a lot of things, including the cost within your network. So if you focus on the user experience, then it's going to help you on the cost side. It's going to drive up profits, margin, and such. So I think that's a good answer for that one. Join us again in 2 weeks when we're going to ask the question: are the existing approaches to automation really enough? Till then, thank you.
Thanks.
That's it for today. We hope we've managed to challenge your perspective just a bit. If you've enjoyed listening, please like us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you'd like to comment on what you've heard, please do so in the comments section. Thanks for listening.